I think a lot of it comes down to publishing wanting a particular voice from us. So yeah, it does make it harder to find fantasy or sci-fi or even romance to an extent. Stories that like are universally explored, but they want a particular narrative.
To kick things off, I want to talk about the Free Books campaign. Yeah. Since 2020, you've distributed over 8,000 books, which is good. Like, that's I don't even, maybe good might even sound condescending, but it's massive. But it's massive, and that's like proper sick work. So first of all, hats off to yourself and the team that are making this happen. Can you talk about what the reality has been like trying to, first of all, start up the Free Books campaign and what it's looked like? I know you do other things, you do a number of different jobs as well, and how you've been able to build something like that and sustain it over 4 years.
So the Free Books campaign started as a humble fundraiser, and I say humble because we're only trying to fundraise £1,000, and for books that doesn't actually buy you that much, because books range between like £10 to £20 now. They're really expensive. So it was just started off like that, and it was going to be like, okay, fundraise for this, get some books out to people, and that would be that. And then the fundraiser grew from like 1,000 to 3 to 4, up to 7. And then I had all of this money, and I wanted to make sure that people felt assured that it was going where I said it was going to go. So we ended up becoming a community interest company, so like registering as a community interest company, which is non-profit, which means that all money goes straight back into running it. So that's like books, operational costs, all of that stuff. And then I would say it was very much like organic and community built. So I founded it, of course, but it was authors, publishers, ordinary people, book lovers that did so much to support the campaign to get to where it was. That's why it's even called campaign, because you won't really find campaign in a business title, right? Yeah, because it just started that way. And I had publishers hitting me up saying, we want to partner with you, we want to get books to use that. And so it was getting loads of deliveries at one point, and I was running the campaign from my flat, so my flat was basically like a warehouse of books at one point.
Sounds like a book lover's dream.
Yeah, I can't lie, it was like Christmas every day, like boxes and boxes of books coming around.
Yeah. That's sick. I feel like we're in a bit of a weird time right now, just in society in general. So in 2020, obviously, the George Floyd murder happened, and there was a massive swing with a lot of organisations and people speaking out against systemic issues and that kind of thing, and saying, we're going to do X, Y, Z. And then of late, maybe over the last, 6 months or so, I don't know, but it seems like there's been, not only are people not talking about it as much as being like quite a rapid swing in another direction with some organisations and some people. So the organisations are like cutting their D&I budgets and getting rid of entire teams and tweeting and speaking out against anything to do with diversity whatsoever. Then you have some subset of people who still do believe in that and will hold true to that. And then it's just a bit of a weird space I feel like we're in right now, globally, because of that. And I'm a massive believer in representation, somewhat behind the reason why I started 1,000 Voices in the first place, to represent and put out positive Black British voices. I'm wondering what your thoughts are, particularly in the literature or that sort of space. The importance of representation and what your thoughts are on that? Yeah,
before I started the campaign, I was actually working in academia in EDI, DAI kind of roles. So I'd seen how over the, since I was a student actually, how those kind of things became more. But when we say more and more, it was like 1 or 2 people were hired to combat an entire institution's racism. And then it's just plateaued, and then in fact as you say, they've literally cut these roles, because I don't think it's companies care to seem like they're doing stuff anymore, and a lot of it was performative anyway. But in terms of representation in literature, I'd say that there's definitely way more books by authors of colour that you can find on the shelves now. Compared to when we were probably younger, there wasn't really many books that we'd find with the represented us, or the diversity of us, I should say, all the different stories, cultures, voices, even languages. And you can find a lot more really amazing children's books, for example. All kinds of different genres we're stepping into, but there is still tendency for publishers to want a specific kind of narrative from Black writers,
right?
Which is like, you know, the stereotypical trauma mining, that kind of stuff about how racism has impacted your life, for example. But you couldn't go and write, say, a sci-fi fantasy, because people would probably, like, the publishers would be like, oh, could you put a little bit of a twinge on there about how they're suffering from racism whilst they're in space or something, like.
Do you talk to publishers directly? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Are you hearing anything like, or more so actually? So I know what you're saying in terms of representation. Like, I do feel like I'm coming across more myself, but it's because I'm going out, so I'm Googling, like, let me find a Black sci-fi book or a Black fantasy book or whatever, and then I'm finding like particular books where I'm still having to like go out and look. It's not the kind of thing I just walk into a bookshop and then I'll easily find it. So maybe from my perspective, I don't know what your perspective is, but from my perspective, it still feels like it's a bit of it's not always super easy, especially in some specific genres as well.
Yeah.
Maybe in self-help and stuff, maybe it's a bit easier, but when you're looking at some fiction titles, it's harder to find books that are a bit more diverse, I feel. I mean, what are publishers saying about that? Are they trying to rectify that now as well? Or?
I wouldn't say I've explicitly had those kind of conversations with publishers. It's been more about how we can get the books that they have on their roster of authors of colour to readers. But I do agree with you. I think if you go to a bookshop in a certain area, you're going to find like less authors of colour compared to other areas, because they're all curated around like the demographic of people in the area as well, I find. But yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to publishing wanting a particular voice from us. So yeah, it does make it harder to find fantasy or sci-fi or even romance to an extent, stories that like are universally explored, but they want a particular narrative. So yeah, it can be quite difficult to find that. So,
have you ever read any particular book that you read it and you're like, wow, okay, this is really either profoundly like shifting your mindset or just something like maybe something that you really seen yourself within? And if so, what was that and what did that change within you?
I plug this book all the time. Poor by Caleb Femi. It's a poetry collection, and before then I would say that I never read poetry. Like, I definitely was of that school of thought that poetry isn't really for us. It's like the William Wordsworth or whatever you learn at school, the people like the rich white people from hundreds of years ago that just stood on London Bridge daydreaming and writing it down. Like, those are the kinds of people that I thought poetry was reserved for. But Poor was, it got sent to me around the time that I started the campaign, and I gave it a read and it was incredible. I've recommended it to so many people. I always go on about this book. But he basically talks about growing up in ends, but it's not a trauma dump, and it's not how woeful it is growing up on an estate or any of that. It's actually all the really beautiful things about growing up on an estate, like the community, or just like things that trigger memories, like bubblegum smelling floor cleaner. Do you know what I mean? Like random little bits, but I grew up on an estate, so reading it, I'm like, I remember that. Like, it's a really beautiful collection, and it's written in a way that isn't trying to pander to a particular audience either. So I really love that.
That's sick. I think he's a British guy, right?
Yeah, South London.
I've seen him on socials actually. I think I haven't come across the book though actually.
Yeah, he's a multidisciplinarian. Like, he does everything.
Nice. I'll check it out. Right?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
You spoke about you grew up in an estate. Mm-hmm. How's your background contributed to you doing the type of work that you're doing now?
Yeah, I would say my estate, when I say I grew up in an estate, people will have a particular view in mind, right? But I grew up in a white estate.
Okay.
So exactly. Yeah. So my estate was full of racist people. That we were the only family of colour, I should say, in the block for many years before another family moved in. And I would say class, I think, for class and race were two of the defining characteristics for me growing up. But I think class was the thing that brought us all together in the estate. Race was what separated us. So I think because of the united class struggle, there'd be a lot of things like, our neighbours would say outwardly racist things around us, but we like you, so it's okay. Because they can identify with our struggle that we're all facing, which is money and economics and living in poverty. But it was the race bit that was still that divider. So I'd say, like, I grew up really rejecting any of my kind of culture and heritage, wanted to stay far away from that. And I think that was just a defense mechanism to try and just, be part of the crowd and not stand out too much. And probably also for self-preservation, because people were violently racist, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And not often as much toward women, but, And then, the class thing, we couldn't really afford, like, to go out and buy books all the time. So when World Book Day had them little £1 vouchers you get, I used to love going to Waterstones after school and getting a book with that voucher, knowing that I could get a book and I'll be going home with one. Or on World Book Day at school, when they brought out those little trolleys full of all the, like, special edition books and everything. I used to love that because then we could all participate in it. But thankfully I had a library across the road from my estate, so at least I had that.
What changed for you then, in the sense that, so you're growing up in an area where there's a lot of outward racism and you're hearing it and you're rejecting that aspect of yourself because of that environment you're in? Of course, makes sense. But when I was looking into you and your socials and that kind of thing, you're very outspoken about racial issues and systemic issues in the UK. What changed?
Good question. I think there's a few things, but kind of my awakening per se was when I studied abroad. So, I went to school in Brentwood. So it's very white, like Towie. Literally went to school with people from Towie. It was, a very white middle class, which was an interesting contrast from the white working class where I lived. So, like, people at school weren't allowed to come to my house because their parents would look down on my area and think it was unsafe. And it was just really, really interesting class dynamics going on. When I went to college, that was probably the first time, actually, that I had friends who weren't white. Like, a whole friendship group that wasn't white. And that was, because the demographic of my school was predominantly white and there was very few of us. And then I went to university, which was also very white, in Lancaster, so like a million miles away. We had like sheep on campus, that kind of vibe. But I studied abroad in America, in North Carolina. So North Carolina was one of the states that seceded from the Union twice because they wanted to keep slavery. So just for context, they still have KKK marches. It's it's the Bible Belt, the southern states. So I think that was awakening sounds cliche, but it was more like a baptism of fire, actually, because when you go to America, like, you've got people open carrying guns, like public as well as police. And then, this was the year of the Ferguson uprisings. So I was there that year. People were doing like die-ins, you lay on the floor and for protesting. Like, it was very, very like in your face racial injustice that's going on in America. And I think I'd been leading up to that anyway over the years, but this was kind of the turning point for me. It made me reflect on what was going on back home.
Because when I reflect on myself, I feel that me coming to terms, maybe becoming more proud, I should say, with my blackness and that, just came through reading books. For me personally, reading certain types of books, like reading and learning more about my family history, actually. Those two things I'd say were the main thing for me. So reading about Black history, Black British history, my heritage is Ghanaian, so Ghanaian history as well, reading about, learning more about my family tree and those kind of things, and just learning where you come from, everything. There's there's a lot of power in that. And that was me when I'm coming more into accepting and embracing my blackness. If I was to encounter or see certain things, maybe like some of the things you're talking about before that, maybe, I don't know, to be honest, I don't know whether it would have moved me or not, I don't know, but after I've gone on my own journey, definitely if I was to come across stuff like that, it would affect me and move me in a certain type of way. Did you have any type of a similar experience? I know that where you grew up, you went through whatever you went through over there, and there was that kind of overt racism in your face, but all right, cool. That was that. Then you've gone through life and you've gone to the US, and okay, something about the US has moved you so much. Were you sort of like on a journey before you went to the US in some way, shape, or form, maybe through books or people you're talking to, or just material you're coming across, and that's why that affected you so much?
Yeah, I'd say so. So I did history at university. I was studying history at uni, and so I'm always really interested in where we come from. But I think, it was probably around the college years that I started to be more purposeful about finding out my roots. So my dad's Moroccan, but I didn't grow up with him. So I didn't really know anything about our ancestry in that sense. And then on my mum's side, her dad's Senegambian, but the family have like different, histories. He either came from Gambia or he came from Senegal. But if you know anything about the history, it was all one anyway before colonisers. So I wanted to start finding out more about my granddad and where he'd come from, because I grew up more with my West African heritage than I did my North, obviously, because my dad wasn't there. So I'd say it was brewing. And then, studied in America. But a friend that was studying at Leeds University, who I'd met in America, she told me about this campaign called Why is My Curriculum White? And it was about decolonising our education system, which is to say, like, decentering a European gaze and looking at education and socio-political issues, history through different lenses. So it's an attempt to not look through everything through our British eyes, in the sense of how we've been socialised and taught to look at the world, that there's things that we might not understand because we haven't been socialised in their context, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
And that was what made me think, okay, like, more critically about what I was learning back at home. And then I came back to England and started that campaign at my university. From there.
When did you finish university?
When?
Yeah, what year?
I finished my undergrad in 2016.
Okay, so there was a period of time between that and then starting the Free Books campaign.
Yeah, because I did a master's after, and then I was elected to my student union for the year as well, and then worked in academia for a bit. Yeah. And campaign started 2020.
Was there a particular event or set of events that led to you, that was that turning point to you saying, okay, we're going to start this campaign up?
I think it was my friend sparking that curiosity in me, because I'd already felt a way. I think I just didn't have the words to articulate it, and I didn't really know exactly what I was feeling, but I was feeling. So my university prides itself on being a top 10 university, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really mean anything. I shouldn't say that. But the history department leaves a lot to be desired. It teaches regional history, for example, but you wouldn't learn that Lancaster was the fourth biggest slave port in the height of the transatlantic slave trade in the UK, because no one thinks about Lancaster like that, right? You'd think everything happened in London, but you wouldn't think about Liverpool as being like a centre for it as well. And so even when you're learning regional history, you're not learning about that. Or if you're learning about Industrial Revolution, where did the mills in Manchester and wherever else get the wool from? Do you know what I mean? Where did they get the cotton from? You don't learn that part of the story. You just learn this part about how amazing it was that Britain led the Industrial Revolution. And this is why we're such an amazing country now. So all of these things I was starting to think more critically about. And then I had like a third year midlife crisis, because I was like, I actually haven't gotten involved in many student activities. You know, at uni you're supposed to join a bunch of societies, sports clubs that are... I hadn't done any of that. I was just like enjoying. So by third year I was like, oh, maybe I should do something. And then, so it's an amalgamation of things. And then I started the campaign, but it was, it's still running now at the university all these years later. There's still students and staff running it. So I'm really proud of how it's ended up. just more work needs to be done. Yeah.
For sure. What is it about you feel that's led you to, because for most people, for everyone really actually, it's going to be easier to go down the well-trodden path and to go and do the simpler stuff, you could say, maybe not simple, but the easier stuff. You got a tried and tested path where it's like you go to uni and then you get your degree, you get your job, you move to the suburbs, have 2.4 children, and you live happily ever after. And then you're doing some other stuff, you're doing the freelance stuff, which is clearly tied to your passions. You've started up the Free Books campaign, which again, you didn't have to do. It would have been easier if you just didn't do it. You just went down.
Trust.
It would have been easier if you just went and done something, tried and tested, even if it was in your area of history or the things you're passionate about. It would have been easier just to go and do some other stuff, but you've gone down a bit more of a difficult path. What is it about you? Do you feel like maybe you've had some kind of an upbringing that has empowered you in some kind of way? Do you have a support system around you, or what do you feel like it is about you that's led you to say, okay, I can do this and I'm going to do this?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question. I think it's audacity. Yeah, sheer audacity, because when you grow up like in an environment where you don't have social capital, you don't have financial capital, you become entrepreneurial by default. Like, you have to figure out how you're going to get yourself out of poverty, how you're going to lead a better life for the next generation, like setting yourself up for the future. So you kind of figure stuff out. And I've never been the kind of person that's like, if you said to me, this is what you have to do, that I'm going to go, yeah, okay. Like, I've always been really tight with my agency, if that makes sense. Like, I don't like to outsource it too often without knowing why. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, so, I mean, my mum started my primary school's first library, which she only just told me that last year.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was at school at the time, but obviously I was in primary school, so I wasn't really cognizant of what was going on. So I guess that my love of education and books comes from my mum. She's always been really tenacious, and she's always been really staunch about what's right and what's wrong. She's the kind of person that if she saw, fighting going on in the street, she'd go and stop it. So that's the kind of strong woman that I grew up with. So in terms of how that translates into my career, the injustice bit, once your eyes are awakened to it, I don't know how people close that off.
People do.
Yeah, they do. They say ignorance is bliss. Like, maybe I would be living a nuclear family right now in the suburbs if I just kind of kept my eyes closed. But yeah, I'm the kind of person that once I know about something, I want to do something. But yeah, also, I really love doing stuff creatively. So guess it's been nice to figure out a way to meld all of those things together. It doesn't have to just be one or the other. It can be, a group of things.
I love what you're doing with the Free Books campaign. I know I've mentioned it a few times. I just think it's like so good and so key. I don't think there's enough representation when it comes, for context anyway, Free Books campaign, I'm distributing books from authors of colour, or is it black authors? Just
authors of colour.
Authors of colour to people who don't have access to them or can't afford the books.
Yeah.
They distribute over 8,000 and I love it. I think it's so key. And it took me a long time, particularly in the fiction world, for me to read books from authors that weren't white and that had black characters in them. I had to really go and look for it. That's why I think it's so cool and so good. How do you keep momentum going amongst all of these different things that you're involved in? And I'm guessing there's going to be an element of late nights and tiredness and all of that. All of that. Like, how do you keep the momentum going in those sorts of times?
Yeah, I think it's just pure passion. Because I would love to say that it was some energy resource that I've learnt to tap into, but it's excitement and passion for being able to pull off what you've envisioned. So with the campaign, we're currently planning our next festival, which will be this summer. And I'm really excited about it. So, like, yeah, working late and stuff like that isn't ideal. And I do try to keep more boundaried with time. But if I have to, it's not the end of the world. Like, because I'm enjoying it, because I know that the final thing is going to be so worth it, because we're going to have impacted way more people this year than we have in previous festivals. So it's that I think with anything I do, I always start at the end point and then work my way back. So, like, even with the campaigns or research I've done or anything, I'm visualising what that end product looks like, and then I figure out how to get there rather than the other way.
And you had an event last week.
Pardon?
Was it last week Thursday, I think it was?
Last week?
I might get mixed up. I read you had, was it a festival? The first one. You put on your first event.
Yes, yeah. We had our first installation at a gallery.
First installation, that was it. Apologies.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I was like, what did I do last week? It was at National Portrait Gallery. So it's usually a space that we don't occupy because we like to go into the heart of our communities. But this was a youth late, so it was for people, I think, 16 to 25, who wanted to come and see the exhibitions. There's a really good exhibition all about Black experiences around the diaspora called The Time Is Always Now, curated by Echo Ocean, which you can go see at National Portrait Gallery. So everything was programmed around that. So we got to take over a room and just turn it into like a little third space. People got to take home free books, including those really expensive exhibition books, which was really nice because you don't often get to do that, but the National Portrait Gallery helped us to make that happen.
I'm a big believer in collaboration. There's some statistics that show that, generally speaking, I've even forgotten these exact numbers, but generally speaking, Black entrepreneurs tend to go solo and don't partner with each other. And then entrepreneurs from other ethnic groups will tend to go in like duos or partnerships and whatnot, and they'll go start the businesses together. Yeah. Now, that's in terms of like founding team, which is slightly different. But when I apply it to what I'm talking about now, what you're doing, so looks like you're forming partnerships with other organisations and these publishers and National Portrait Gallery and whatnot. There's different people who believe in what you're doing and who want to support in whatever way they can do. And I'm a massive believer in that. There's only so far you can go in silos, so you can do so much more when you work together. How do you go about forming these sorts of partnerships? Is it like organic? Do you reach out to them? Do they reach out to you?
You know what? It's a mixture. With the gallery, this really lovely girl called Barakat, she is part of the youth programmers, and she was the one that advocated for us to join the youth late. So yeah, it's really amazing people looking out for opportunities for us, which in turn helps us to help more people. But otherwise it's, again, just Audacity. It's reaching out to people, speaking to people, saying like, what do you think about doing something together? My philosophy is the worst that can happen is they say no. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm just like, why not see what happens? But I'm all about collaboration, because I preach a lot about community, but how can I do that if I'm doing everything solo? So I want to work with as many people as possible, and then I want all of them people to work together, and I want my networks to become your networks, and we all help each other out. I don't like the individualism that this country places upon us. When I was working in academia, it was very much like that. You keep your cards close to your chest. You don't share what you're working on. You're always suspicious, competitive. I hate it. So this is nice to actually be able to do something where we all rise together. Yeah, for sure.
Have you had any people that you've worked with, like people that you distribute the books to, or just campaigns and stuff that you've worked on, that has moved you in a particular type of way? Like maybe somebody has come across a book or read a book and it's moved them in a particular type of way and it's made you think, all right, cool, the work we're doing is needed or something. Just some kind of an experience through the work you're doing. Have you had any of those?
At the beginning, we got an email from someone saying this was the first book they've ever owned, and this was an adult emailing us. And a lot of us take things like a book for granted, and so that was moving, because that was exactly what we wanted to be doing, was making sure that it isn't a luxury to have a book of your own. And I'm very firm about the fact that we want brand new books from publishers so that you can personalize it. And do you know what I mean? Like, it's exciting to get a book that's fresh, brand new. You get to decorate in the way that you want. You know, some people might bend the pages, which is blasphemy. Some people might write in the books. You know, it's not my place to judge, but it's nice to have that own thing yourself, right? So yeah, to have someone message and say that it was their first book that was moving. We also get messages from people saying that they've struggled to find books for their kids that have representative characters, and that through the campaign they've been able to find that. So their kids for the first time are seeing themselves reflected back on the pages. That's really a beautiful thing, because I didn't have that really growing up. I think I must have just read books by like white authors of white kids. Probably the closest I got to that level of representation was Jacqueline Wilson books.
Oh, yeah.
Because she wrote about working class kids. So that was where the class element came in for sure. And last year, our festival last year was in Deptford on Pepys Estate. So it's like literally the community centre is literally in the heart. Like there's an estate that encircles it. And there was 2 little girls that came down, like their parents obviously let them come down to the community centre, and they brought 2 of their own books to contribute. And they were like, it was so cute, because they were probably like 6 or 7, and usually we don't accept donations because we want to take resources from the big publishers and these places with money and resource and redistribute it to community. But obviously we had to. We couldn't say no to these little girls. And it was just really nice because it's like they're doing something really amazing so that other people can read and enjoy the books that they enjoyed. So if we're able to spark that little seed on a 6 or 7-year-old's life, then hopefully they continue to do that and pass it on in the future. And those books went. So some other children must have picked them up. And we gave them a few little extra ones for them to take, and they were just so excited. It was really beautiful.
Nice. Where can people go to find books by Black authors?
I would say you can go on our website, but to get a more comprehensive list, I would recommend searching Roundtable Books. So they're another community interest company, which means that all their any profit that they make goes back into the community. They're based in Brixton, so they have a physical bookshop, but their catalogue is predominantly authors of colour or marginalised authors who might have like neurodivergence, people who are LGBT. Like there's a whole range of intersecting marginalities that they represent in their bookstore. So I would say there is really good for a comprehensive list.
That's cool. And what sort of an impact are you hoping to make through the work that you do?
I would love for us to not have to do this, and like in the realest way, because like so many libraries are closing since 2012, and this data only goes up to pre-pandemic. Over 800 libraries have permanently closed down across like the whole UK due to austerity and many years under the Conservative government, which means that people aren't able to just pop to their local library and borrow books. They're losing that essential link to literature that can transform your life. And also for those who need a third space, i.e. somewhere to use a computer or somewhere to go print something off, or even just a warm place during the day, they're losing that space. So through the campaign, we're hoping to be a temporary stopgap to make sure that people are still able to access books and literature, importantly the books and literature by people of colour. But we're hoping that in a utopia that we're not needed, that everyone should be able to access books equally and equitably.
That's sick. And okay, that's really good. What sort of a vision do you have for the future in terms of, particularly when it comes to representation, that kind of thing? So you're doing good work to distribute books and distribute books by authors of colour to get those untold stories and untold narratives out and far as far as we can. What sort of vision do you have when it comes to the representation of literature and media in general in the UK?
I would love for you to be able to go into a bookstore and say, I want to read a book about sci-fi. I keep using sci-fi because it's a fictional world. And you find a bunch of books by Black authors that happen to be by Black authors. Do you know what I mean? That you haven't had to go out and look deeply for it, that there's enough representation that they exist there as part of the canon, that it isn't a special section in the bookshop, books by Black authors, that there's actually systemic representation in the sense that our stories are embedded across the spectrum of books. That to me would signify success. That you could go to any section of the bookstore and see books by authors of colour all the way throughout, you know, and that we get to write stories that we want to write that don't have to have anything to do with our identity. Why could we not write about, I don't know, aliens or something? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Or even just like write about romance between two people that have nothing to do with race. They're just two people that have found love for one another, that enjoy doing things together, and it's a really beautiful story of how they build that strong connection together. It doesn't have to be like set in a particular time period and there's riots going on and all this kind of stuff. That the racial part is ancillary to the actual story itself.
Yeah. I feel like reading books has done like massively helped to shape my perceptions, my thoughts and my feelings about myself, about other people, about the world. How important do you feel reading is and should be? Maybe we're not reading enough as a society, but in terms of shaping our perceptions and our thoughts and feelings, how we relate with each other and how we relate with the world. Yeah,
massively important. One of my favourite books is called The Mountain Sing. It's by a Vietnamese author called Nguyen Van Quay Mai. And it was one of those transformative books. It's historical fiction and it's told obviously from the perspective of Vietnamese people. So she chronicles the years from like the early 20th century all the way up to the 21st, or like just around the time of the American War in Vietnam. And it shifted my perspective entirely because she tells a history with such compassion for all sides. Like, of course, there were many Americans that were opposed to going to war on Vietnam. There's many Vietnamese people that don't want to fight as well. And there's just the way that she tells history is really beautiful because it isn't black and white oversimplification of good versus bad. It's people in power making those with less power than them fight for their interests. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And she covered a lot of history that I didn't know about. And she also writes in diacritics, so you know all the little dots and accents on language that we see in a lot of non-Western languages.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she writes with those purposefully. She also includes Vietnamese proverbs and language in there without translation, which I think is amazing because you, the reader, have to do a little bit of work. You know, like you have to figure out the context and then enjoy it and read it, and you're challenged to shift your mind. We've seen a lot of books written by authors of colour where they've not anglicised the names, or they've not set them in areas that might be super familiar to particular demographics. Like that people are being way more unapologetic about telling their story from their own cultural lens. So I would say, yeah, literature is absolutely an incredible gateway to that. But storytelling more broadly, you could play video games, for example. If you played like, I don't know, Assassin's Creed, there's, what's that one? There's one set in like ancient Egypt, right?
Prince of Persia.
No. Assassin's Creed, but it's set in like Egypt.
Oh, I'm not massive on games.
No, neither am I. I literally like played it one time. But it's full. Like when you go around the different parts on the game. Yeah. Sound like I don't know what I'm talking about now. It will tell you history, like facts about those areas that you're in and what things mean. So like storytelling exists in so many different forms, but you can learn a lot more about the world. Even TikTok. Like so many people are storytelling on there, and you're learning about how indigenous communities in Alaska farm for their foods. Like, do you know what I mean? Like there's so many different areas that you can learn about. So yeah, in conclusion, literature is really just an incredible gateway to that. And
I guess that sort of highlights as well the danger of only listening to one particular narrative, reading one particular narrative and not hearing different diverse perspectives, because you miss out on you miss out on so much. You miss
You
out.
do.
Yeah, you only hear one particular story, the story that maybe how somebody particularly understands or perceives it, or maybe what they want you to know. Like you took when you spoke about your experience at university, and you're only talking about this type of the history in the UK and regional history, and not about the other side, the uglier side that we're trying to hide. And I guess that's a danger in only looking at one particular narrative for one particular set of people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you run the danger of also seeing a British way as the right way and everything else is wrong. And so if you're only viewing the world through one particular lens, and I say British lens because if you're educated here, then we all share that, unfortunately. You might go abroad and see, I don't know, somewhere like in Ghana, how people sell to you while you're in the car along the streets. You might be like, if from a Western perspective, thinking what's going on here and turn your nose down at it, instead of seeing that these are super entrepreneurial people and how amazing you get to shop from the comfort of your car. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's different ways of seeing the world, but if we only see everything through that one British lens, then you're not going to see the beauty in the rest of the world, or even understand how Britain even came to be, or why we're all here.
Yeah. What's one message that you want people to take away from this conversation today?
Oh my God. one shot. Challenge yourself to watch or read or play something that you would normally turn your nose up at, or that you would normally think, no, that's not for me. And you'll be surprised at what you might enjoy.
Thank you very much. And as we wrap up, have you got any final words for us?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Our next Free Books Festival is the 19th, 20th and 21st of July, so save the date.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put that in the description as well, so that's there for anybody that's watching and listening to this as well. So that's that then. Thank you for coming down. Really appreciate you coming. Me. Yeah, really appreciate you coming down. Learned a lot. Very interesting for sure. So thank you for coming and sharing on your wisdom, on your experience, on the amazing work you do with the Free Books campaign. And we'll make sure to put all of the information in the description as well. So for the Free Books campaign, for the festival, and any other important links as well. So thank you for coming down once again. This is 1000 Voices. We had Sofia Akel on the podcast, and for now, people, we're out. All right, cool.
Thank you. That was really great.
Yeah, all good. Thank you. Jules, can you